But at this one, he was on lockdown 23 hours a day, 1 hour out of his cell, and he couldn't take it. He didn't like that. And so this is actually where the case just gets started. Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. My name is Janae, if you didn't know, and today's video is another true crime episode. So if you're ready, let's go. Alright y'all, so I'm not going to talk as much as I did at the beginning of the last video. So we're just going to go ahead and jump into the second case for Mystery Week. Don't forget to let me know in the comments what y'all think the theme for the week is. And yeah, let's just go ahead and get right into it. And today's case actually starts in jail. It starts in jail with a lady named Pamela Dickens and her husband Timothy Dickens, who both work as corrections officers at Colorado Territorial Correctional Facility. So Pam and Tim met when Pam was straight out of high school, and right away the family liked Tim. They said he was a good guy, and that him and Pam, they just fit together. Like, they just went together. And eventually they would end up getting married and have two girls. And once they had the two little girls, Pam became a stay-at-home mom while Tim was the breadwinner. And he would actually end up going off to the army for about 20 years before he decided to leave the military. And once he left the military, he would then get a job at the correctional facility that I told y'all about a little bit earlier. And once the girls grew up and once they got older and out of the house, Pam decided that she no longer wanted to stay in the house because her sole job was to take care of the kids. And now that she didn't have to do that anymore, she decided that she wanted to get a job as well. And this is when Tim, I don't know if Tim got her a job at the correctional facility or somebody else in her family, because she did have another family member who worked for this correctional facility. He wasn't a correctional officer. He was actually in Intel, but he worked there as well. So either way, Pamela ended up getting a job at the correctional facility that her husband worked at as a correctional officer as well. And this is where the problems began, because in June 2003, Pam's co-workers, they started noticing some funny business between Pam and an inmate. They had started noticing that she and this inmate would spend a little bit too much time in restricted areas, because his name is Rick Hampton, and he is actually a jail janitor. So he got a little bit more freedom, if you will, than some of the other inmates, as to he can, you know, he gotta do his janitorial thing. And so he's out of his cell more than others. He goes into other areas that other inmates can't go into or shouldn't be going into. And he and Pam took advantage of this, and other correctional officers started taking notice because they would spend a little bit too much time in the janitor closet for him to get his supplies, right? And so because of this, they started reporting it to their superior. And once the superior got a hold of this information, she had to start doing her own investigation, because obviously she has to take all of these types of claims seriously. But if there's nothing to back up the claims, then there's really, there's nothing to go on. But the higher up who was taking all of this information, she didn't doubt that this was happening. She just needed proof, because Rick had a history of like compromising the female officers. He had a history of playing with their minds and like getting into their head. And for him, it was a game. He liked the fact that he could gain control over the person who was supposed to have control over him, type of deal. So this higher up, she knew that it was probably more than likely a possibility that Officer Dickens and Rick Hampton was having this affair. But like I said, she couldn't just go rush in and be like, hey, yo, what you doing, without proof, right? So as time keeps going on, there's more and more complaints being filed against Officer Dickens about this relationship that she's having with Rick. One of the complaints has said that Rick and Pam was coming from an isolated stairwell where not a lot of officers would be going either. It said that they was coming from this stairwell and they was breathing all heavy and like acting weird and nervous and stuff like that. And once this complaint came across her desk, and once this complaint came across the higher up's desk, she had been stacking evidence, right? She had already been stacking evidence, but once she got this one, it was like, okay, so now I got this plus, the other mountain of complaints. Let me send this to my higher up. So it goes up the chain of command again, and it goes to a guy named Alex Wald, and he's the chief criminal investigator. So this is what he do. So he made the decision to move Rick Hampton out of the facility that he was in with Pam to Colorado State Penitentiary. And now you would think that since Rick got moved, the story would be over. But absolutely not, because the prison that he got sent to was a maximum security prison, which meant that he was going to be on lockdown for 23 hours a day. And Rick did not like this. He didn't want his freedom taken any more than it was already taken. Plus, he was a janitor at the other prison, and he could walk around kind of freely, like, sort of. But at this one, he was on lockdown 23 hours a day, 1 hour out of his cell, and he couldn't take it. He didn't like that. And so this is actually where the case just gets started. So Rick started writing letters to the intel supervisor, Dan Foster, and he keeps telling Dan in these letters, like, hey, I need to talk to you and Alex. Remember the chief investigating guy? He said he needed to talk to Dan and Alex ASAP. And Dan and Alex are familiar with Rick. They know his name because Rick is not the most um, I don't want to say good inmate, what you call him, obedient, I guess, inmate. And like I said, he was known for playing people, manipulating people, trying to get what he wanted, stuff like that. And so Dan is getting these letters, and at first he was kind of just like, okay, whatever. But the more letters that he would get from Rick, the more he starts to feel like, okay, maybe me and Alex really do need to sit down with this guy. And so he get in contact with Alex, and he tells Alex, like, look, Rick is sending me these letters. He's saying he needs to talk to us. We need to sit down with this guy. And so finally, Alex and Dan sit down with Rick. And they was not ready for what Rick was about to tell them. They wasn't ready. So during this meeting, Rick tells Dan and Alex that yes, he was having an affair with Pam, and he has letters to prove it and all this kind of stuff. And he offers up these letters to Alex and Dan. But he also tells them that Pamela wants Timothy killed. She wants her husband killed. And Alex is like, okay, you telling me this, but what you want? Because you're not just offering up this information for free. And I know you're not, because you're Rick Hampton and you do nothing that's not going to benefit you. So what you want? And basically, Rick said he wanted out of the maximum security prison. And so Alex is like, okay, we can do that. We can make that happen. But we can only make that happen if you can prove that you're not lying. And so Rick tells Alex that Pamela told him things about Tim that he should not know. He know what kind of car Tim drive. He know what their house look like. He know Tim's schedule. And Alex is like, okay. Now, because it's Rick and they still need more evidence, they decide not to tell Tim about Pam's so-called plan to have him killed because they don't want to startle him. They don't want him to not believe them, and they don't want him to confront Pam about anything. So they have to let on as though they know nothing. But mind y'all, that's probably hard for them to do because these are not people that these officers and these officials don't know. Usually these are people that they have no knowledge about prior to the person coming to the police saying that somebody wants somebody killed, right? No, that's not the case here. Pamela works in the correctional facility with them, under them. They know her. Timothy works in the correctional facility with them and under them. They know Tim. They know both parties very well. And so I'm pretty sure it was hard for them not to tell Tim that his wife wanted him killed. And it was probably hard for them to believe that this person who works for them, Pam, wants her husband killed. Like, so now they had to figure out how they was going to get Pam and Rick to be talking again because Rick is in this maximum security prison, only let out for 1 hour a day. Pam is over here working at the other correctional facility. He can't call that correctional facility. And then if Rick calling her on her cell phone, she knows that all jailhouse calls are tapped. So she's not really going to talk that way. So Rick offers up that he can talk to Pam through his lawyer because that's what they had been doing when they want to talk privately anyway. So what he would do is he would call his lawyer because those phone calls can't be recorded, and he would have his lawyer call Pam on three-way, right? And so they got the lawyer to agree to let them like set up shop in his office at certain points in time, and Rick will call Pam. And Rick will call Pam through his lawyer's office from time to time. So for a long little while, Alex and Dan had to sit through some uncomfortable flirting between Rick and Pam, and just a bunch of phone calls about how she missed him, how she loved him, how she can't wait till he get out. Mind y'all, he was, doing 35 years. I don't know how far he was into his sentence at this point, but he was sentenced to 35 years. So, I mean, maybe he was on his way out. I don't know. But anyways, so Dan and Alex had to endure this uncomfortable conversation for a while until finally one day the topic is brought up about Tim and her wanting him gone, right? And at first she's not necessarily giving much, and it's more or less Rick saying stuff and her just saying, yeah, yep. Like, he'll be like, you remember that thing we talked about? I can make it happen. We can make it happen. We can do this. We can do that. And she's like, yeah. But they can't use that, and so they have to keep playing this waiting game. So months will go by, and it's now December 2003, and the conversation finally leads to Rick having a hitman to carry out Pam's plan, right? So he tells her that he got a guy named Bill from New York, and that he was telling Rick it can happen on December 12th if she really wanted to. And she's just going along with it, talking to him about it. And eventually the subject comes up about the life insurance policy. And now remember, I told you he knew that Pam had a $250,000 life insurance policy out on Tim. And so he tells her, like, I would tell you to up the life insurance on him, but that'll seem kind of suspicious. And Pam was like, oh, nope, already done it. And he goes, how much? She has taken out another life insurance policy on Tim for $1 million. She's paying the premium, and Tim has no idea that she has this policy out on him. And Pam is essentially just digging herself in a hole because Alex and Dan are listening to this. So anyways, they tell Rick that he has to give her the opportunity to back out. And he does. He gives her the opportunity to back out and says, if you don't want to do this, we don't have to do this. Don't let me put nothing in your ear. I want this to be all, like, I don't want you to think that this is what I want if it's not what you want, because I only want what you want. And she was like, I want it. And so he was like, all right. He said that Bill would need a couple of things when she show up. He said that Bill wanted a photo of Tim. He wanted the insurance policy, and he needed $1,000 up front. And Pam was just like, okay, no problem. I got you. And so they get off the phone by Rick telling her that Bill is going to call her in a couple of days to sort all the details out. And in the meantime, Pamela's still going to work because they don't want to raise any alarms with her. They don't want her to know that they know anything. So they want her day and her routine to remain as normal as possible. And so she's still going to work. So a couple of days later, Bill calls Pam as planned. And they decide that they're going to meet in a parking lot, in a Denny's parking lot, on December 12th. And so once the meeting day comes and she finally in the car with Bill, Pam is nervous. And it's visible that she is nervous. So Bill gets her to drop her guard. She opened up her jacket to let him know that she's not a cop. He opened up his jacket to let her know that he's not a cop, even though he got a recorder in his top pocket. But anyways, they get to talking and they start to bond over the fact that they both trust Rick. Like, Bill said that he would trust Rick with his life. And if Rick say that Pam is good, then he believed Pam is good. And Pam says the same for Bill. And as nervous as I said Pam was in the beginning, once she let her guard down, she really let her guard down. Because before Bill could even ask her how she wanted this done, she asked, could she make a suggestion about how it gets done? And she said that she wants it to look accidental. She wants him to pretty much knock on the door, knock him out, drag him around, put him in the jacuzzi, and then make it seem like he was drunk and drowned in the jacuzzi. Because apparently Tim did this thing where he would drink maybe a little bit too much, and then he would get in the hot tub. And so she figured if it looked like he had drowned in a hot tub because he got too drunk, would nobody suspect a thing? So Rick go with it, and he's like, cool, I can do that. Do you have the items that I asked for? And so Pam pulls out all of the things that he asked for. Photos of Tim, photos of the hot tub, photos of the layout of the house, and the $1,000 deposit. Now, as per standard protocol, he has to offer her an out, which he does, and she does not take. So with the exchange of the money, the deal is done. Bill tells Pam to have a Merry Christmas, and with that, she is out of his car. And less than 20 seconds later, she is down on the ground and in handcuffs, taken into custody, being arrested for the solicitation of the murder of Tim. So after Pam is taken into custody, Tim is finally notified that his wife wanted to have him killed, and Tim is heartbroken, absolutely heartbroken. He thought that, I mean, he and Pam had been together for years at this point. They have two daughters. He knew that there was some type of strain in the relationship, and he knew like it wasn't the best, you know, but this had been a marriage of ups and downs, and he didn't he would never have thought that Pam would do something like this. And just a couple days later, he took all the Christmas presents back that he had bought Pam because he said he wasn't giving them to her. I mean, how could he give them to her anyways? But he took all them Christmas presents back. He said he getting all his money back for all of that. And like I said, he was pretty much just heartbroken. Instead of going to trial, Pam decided to take a plea where she was sentenced to 16 years in prison. And instead of sending her to the penitentiary where she used to work, they sent her to an out-of-state prison because that would have been some real cold, messed up, cold-hearted stuff to send her to the prison that she used to work at. Like, she would have got her ass beat in that prison, I believe. But neither here nor there. She took the plea. She got 16 years and she got sent to an out-of-state prison. And Tim moved on with his life. And just about a year after the attempt on his life, he met another young lady and they ended up getting married. And Tim was finally happy again. But unfortunately, about 3 years later in 2006, he will be diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and succumb to his illness 3 years after that in 2009. And so that concludes today's case. Thank you all so very much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know if y'all have figured out the theme for the week yet. And I will see you all in the next one. So Pam and Tim, yeah. So Pam and Tim met right out of high. So Pam and Tim, that is going to be hard for me to say. Why? I don't know. Alex Ward. Is it Ward? Wald? I would tell you to get a higher. I would. And so Rick tells Pam that he got a guy from New York named Bill. I just thought about Buffalo. I just thought Buffalo Bill. Like, he couldn't come up with a better name for a guy from New York. Anyway,